Ages of man, struck by what Gelman calls a comet of deep Jewish anxiety, a phrase that pretty much describes my life. So, Brett, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's so great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Sure. I wanted to start with Israel, and maybe we can even start on a bit of a positive note. I think you visited recently. Is that right?
I did. My fiance and I, we went twice actually. And overall, we were there for 3 weeks, and yeah, so it was pretty. We were there. The biggest chunk was over the holiday in December.
Tell me, what was that like? What kind of things did you see that I'm sure it wasn't your typical tourist visit?
Yeah, no, of course not. You we went there. One of the reasons we went there, I mean, we went there with delegations that, for the objective of making content, as they call it, a word that I am coming to despise more and more. But nevertheless, we want, making video footage to post on social media to help spread education about what was going on there. So we went to some of the kibbutzim, Kfar Aza, Kibbutz Be'eri. We went to Nativa Sarah. We met with Nova survivors. We met with hostage families. We met with, we met with organizations, heads of organizations like Leket and Brothers and Sisters that are doing incredible relief work for the Israeli people. I mean, Brothers and Sisters is basically functioning as the government at times, or at least was very much so in the immediate aftermath of the 7th. And then we just we're trying to just show what had happened there, and we felt a responsibility that if we were going to talk about it, we should be there and have boots on the ground. Also, my fiance is an Israeli American, and so we have a lot of friends and family there, and so we wanted to see them and give them our support as well. And we also, we did a live show for people in Tel Aviv. We made sure to, visit the Kotel and all of these things. So just really stoked in a lot of experience. Was doing things with Stand With Us and CCF Peace and all of these organizations to help spread the word. So it was heartbreaking, but at the same time, I felt it was really, really healing. Because it was just great to be amongst people who all felt and thought the same way that you did about this situation, and really the Israeli people are just such inspiring people that even when you were on the kibbutzim, you would talk to somebody who's who had lost family members, or somebody who had been, who had been hiding in their shelter with their dog the whole time everybody was being slaughtered outside. And thankfully, by the time the terrorists would have gotten to him, the soldiers had finally shown up. He was like far enough away from the immediate action of it that you just saw their incredible humanity showing through. Like, Israel still has not lost its light, and that is something that filled me with a lot of strength and fueled me to come back here and continue my resolve in speaking the truth, no matter how much backlash I was getting.
I saw that you had a number of bookstores: San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, Winnetka, Illinois, where I was just like a week after they were canceled. Your events were canceled. I think you were told that mostly the bookstores couldn't guarantee the safety of the event. Did you expect this kind of pushback when you started kind of speaking out after October 7th?
I expected a backlash. I definitely thought, based on how people had reacted in the past, I mean, I spoke out a bit on the last conflict in 2021, and there was definitely people coming at me then, and I'm well aware of the demonization uh, of Israel and the propaganda that's been filtered into this country. However, I did not think that it was going to cause cancellations at these bookstores.
Mm.
That I mean, the Los Angeles one didn't shock me because it happened a bit after the uh, the ones in Winnetka and San Francisco did.
Mm.
Did it shock me? It didn't like completely shock me, but it ain't. It was really disturbing. So, but yeah, I it didn't absolutely shock me because of the way the violence that has come at me, the verbal violence or internet violence, whatever, the digital violence that has come at me
Right.
since the 7th.
What's the, I mean, in the community, and I'm thinking of the entertaining community, whether it's Los Angeles, you said, I think you're in Malibu right now. I know that, for example, you signed a letter criticizing Nathan Glazer's, not Nathan Glazer, Jonathan Glazer's Oscar night speech, which you said the Zone of Interest director drew a moral equivalence between a Nazi regime that sought to exterminate a race of people and an Israeli nation that seeks to avert its own extermination. I think there are about 1,000 signatures on that. The last time I looked. Do you feel like a lonely voice in Hollywood, or do you think there's a kind of a critical mass of people who share your views and are a counter to the kind of anti-Israel feelings that are out there?
Um, the long and short of it is that I'm not exactly certain. I know that there are a lot of people in Hollywood who agree with me, with us, support us. However, a lot of those people are very silent and are scared, and a lot of that is fear. I do think that there is this unfortunate faction of Hollywood that I used to consider myself a part of, which was the new makers of things,
Mhm.
the new culture. That unfortunately, I've seen a lot of those people be swayed by this propaganda. I found that speech very, very unfortunate, to say the least. Um, I am amazed that as people decide to weigh in on this conflict,
Mhm.
when there's many conflicts that they could weigh in on and don't. But the lack of self-awareness, the lack of critical thinking, it's not surprising because Hollywood is filled with narcissists.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of people, as they're gaining success, can very easily gain in narcissism and become, almost self-awareness can become a liability because they're moving like they're on a freight train, and they're experiencing so much that they've never experienced before that's so intense, and they're so afraid to lose it, and they are pumping themselves up and whatnot. But the lack of self-awareness in terms of not even thinking that they should also mention Hamas,
Right.
that they should also blame Hamas in this. I'm someone who believes that you should fully blame Hamas for this. They started this war. They are the ones putting their own people in harm's way. Like, if you cared about the Palestinians, why were you not speaking out against Hamas's treatment of the Palestinians this last, more than a decade?
Mhm.
Um, you call Gaza an open air prison and you place none of that blame on Hamas. That is that is ruling over that region with terror, let alone to, with what they're doing to Israel. That you don't acknowledge the hostages, that you don't acknowledge that Hamas is still firing rockets, that Hamas is saying no to ceasefire deals.
Right. Do you?
And so it's just like that lack of critical thinking is really disturbing, coming from people whose job it is. I think one of our jobs as artists is to mine the human experience and mine, really be self-critical.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Is any of the tensions over this leaking into projects? I'm thinking of there's tensions on sets now, jobs won or jobs lost over this. And I could also ask, do you worry at any point, or do some of your colleagues worry how this will affect things like a new seasons of Stranger Things, where people might, call for boycotts and all that? Is that in the air right now?
No, I don't think so. I think um, people are pretty good. At least, I've not encountered that on my jobs.
Mm-hmm.
I'm either surrounded by people who support, or if maybe people don't, I'm not sure of this, they're not making that be known, and they're doing a good job of putting that aside in order to get the job done. So and I think everybody on the show really likes each other, and so I've not encountered that.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to transition to your book.
Yeah,
And for
yeah, yeah, of
people
course.
who don't know, it's about 5 characters at various stages of life and death. Actually, it's a young boy, a teen, a Hollywood entertainer, in what seems like the waning peak of his career, an aging widow, and, as we mentioned before, a dead man named Z in the afterlife. Um, since the first stories are particularly fraught about a Jewish upbringing, let's say, I want to ask you about yours. Can you tell us where you grew up and some of the positive and perhaps negative memories you have of growing up Jewish?
Yeah, I grew up in Highland Park, Illinois, the North Shore of Chicago, very close to Winnetka, where Winnetka is also a part of the North Shore.
Mm-hmm.
Highland Park is a predominantly Jewish community, so the culture of being Jewish is is omnipresent at all times. Um, I grew up Reformed, but we did go to synagogue, and I was bar mitzvahed, and but it was, I would say that I was mostly culturally raised a Jew, and so that meant a lot of fun, but also a lot of fighting
Of course.
all the time, and so yeah, I grew up, I was a neurotic child. I would say that my family, my sister and I are pretty neurotic people. My mother's a pretty neurotic woman. My father was like one of these tough Chicago Jews, but
Mm-hmm.
I think he was a closet neurotic. He was. I mean, he couldn't handle like a crumb being on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
So that's neurosis, absolutely. But yeah, it was like, and then I grew up wanting to do this. So I was, I very much like lived in front of the television in a lot of ways, in which I would be watching comedians constantly, many of which, if not most, were Jewish,
Mm-hmm.
particularly the Marx Brothers and Mel Brooks. And so that just, my family's like, I grew up very close with my uncles and aunts and cousins, and there was just, humor was very valued,
Mm-hmm.
laughter was very valued, and my family is very, very funny. So that fueled me too. My family was a big influence on that. So you had, it was boisterous emotion. It was a lot. I'm
Mhm.
told I'm told I'm a lot
Mhm.
by many close people to me, and yeah, I mean, I'm a Jew, and B, I'm a Gelman.
I feel I have to drag you back to Israel for a second because, in some sense, your identification with the issue, did that come late in life? Is that something that has a particular moment, if not October 7th, something before that, where you said, you know what, I have to come out of the closet on this issue because of X, Y, or Z? Was there a moment?
Yeah, absolutely. Israel growing up, I was never an anti-Zionist. I was always a Zionist. I never believed I always believed in the existence of Israel. That was never in question to me.
Mhm.
Um, However, as I am a progressive liberal person. And I was hanging out for a while in circles that were ultra progressive, and we're starting to adopt these things of oppressor and oppressed. And um, I've always been outspoken about a lot of issues, and I do think that most of the progressive stances are real. I believe in systemic racism and homophobia and transphobia and misogyny. I'm pro. I'm pro environment. I'm a lot of I believe in all of these things, and so I think out of the need to belong, which I think is a strong need in me, I think I started to sort of buy into that thing that I was white and I benefited from white privilege a little bit. But then 6 years ago, I met my fiance, and she sort of smacked me awake a bit, and I was speaking on what was going on between Israel and the Palestinians in a very uneducated way too,
Mhm.
because what this all is relating it to the black struggle in the United States. It's relating that conflict to that.
Right.
To that's the brilliance of the PR of whoever is doing it, whether it's Iran or Qatar, that they've put in, or Hamas themselves, that this is related to that struggle when it's a completely different situation. And so I was sort of like buying into that whole thing that that the Israeli government was ultra oppressive on the Palestinian people. And I'm not saying that, you know, in my opinion, that Israel's government doesn't deserve criticism and isn't, and their hands are completely clean. However, I was very uneducated about how I was talking about it, and it was way too slanted in this way. Had I not met my fiance, who knows? I might have been one of these pick me Jews.
Mhm.
Um, and she was like, "You're a self-hating Jew. You know nothing about Israel, nothing about it."
Mhm.
And she's like, and so I think for a while, I think there was, that self hatred was like keeping me maybe from prioritizing going. I didn't go. My parents were afraid to go to Israel when we grew up. They loved, we gave money to Israel, like they believed in it. They were always on Israel's side, but they were afraid to go.
Right.
And so I think that like very much stayed in me. And then I was like, okay, I want to go once I met my fiance, and then career and all of these things take over, and I think it's very possible I was still subconsciously avoiding it. And then a year ago I finally went for the first time,
Mhm.
and but before I went, I had this awakening of my support for uh for Israel, and that happened a few years ago, where I saw, and then I started to recognize that this whole thing of the Jew is white was a massive uh, propaganda campaign, and something that is just a complete falsehood, and I stopped living by that falsehood.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Your book is subtitled Nearly True Stories. I have to ask the question, how nearly true are these stories? That'll lead me into my next question. But is it fair to call these autobiographical essays or stories?
I wouldn't call them straight autobiographical. It's taking autobiographical elements at times and then amplifying them and blowing them out and bringing them almost to like this surreal, even cartoonish level at times in the book. So it's definitely taking autobiographical elements of my life as major inspiration. But then, you know, I write in somewhat of a stream of consciousness type of way, and so I'm using these kernels, and then I'm following the process through those kernels and seeing where that leads me. However, all of the characters do feel like me or my shadow self of who I was, who I, you know, am afraid that I am, who I'm afraid I could become. And then also celebrating those ugly aspects, because that's you know, that's another thing that I believe, that I think that this current culture has really demonized, which is this, you know, this thing that the reality that human beings are flawed, are deeply flawed, and we're living in this like this era of complete illusion of that you need to be a perfect person. And we've seen this horseshoe effect of the left and the right, where it's the ultra left and the ultra left right, where it's like, oh no, you need to, you know, you don't have flaws, and you're not, and if you're at all capable of doing bad things, you know, that's it for you. That's it for you. Whereas as opposed to, that's not the reality of humanity. Everybody, to me, you know, my whole artistic training, my whole humanistic training is growing up realizing that there's, for anybody, there is a possibility of the most horrible things.
Mm-hmm. And redemption.
You know, yeah, exactly. And this is what art is about. This is certainly what, to me, literature and drama is about.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something that I really wanted to delve into the book, that though I'm like showing all of this ugliness, I do believe that there's a beauty in the ugliness too.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that all of the characters, in a way, no matter how dark their darkness is, they're all still capable of some sort of redemption, because you know, something caused the flaws in them to exist.
Right. You have your youngest character is Abraham Amsterdam.
Yes.
And I know in those stories you excavate a lot of childhood pain. He's a lonely little boy who I gather suffers from OCD or some version of some kind of a compulsive disorder.
Yeah.
Was that a difficult process? Because I imagine, even if it's not direct autobiography, it's really hard kind of go deep into what a lonely childhood was like. What does that feel like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that him and the teenager Mendel are probably the most directly autobiographical. I mean, even though it's again blown out to an extreme, but Abraham, I would say there's aspects of him that are pretty dead on to what. Yeah, I still suffer from OCD, I guess, if that's what we would call it. I mean, that's definitely what my childhood psychiatrist diagnosed me with, and he was a brilliant man, so I'll believe him. And I definitely see, you know, it's something that has to be maintained constantly. And yeah, I mean, that's what the whole first story, The Demons Are, is OCD. And I really, was it hard? Yeah, it was hard, I think, to excavate that, but then also healing. That's always the thing of whether I'm writing or I'm acting, I'm excavating a lot of personal things that match up with that character, and pulling things that are in the darkest recesses of my brain and my life, and so that can be very painful to bring out, but it's like a birth, you know, it's a birth of a very, very dark child.
I couldn't do it. As I was reading the book, I'm thinking, could I do this by chance? Nah, I'm not going there. Uh, you also have a
Yeah,
great,
I mean, I'm like, that's part of like, that's always been my whole thing. And I idolize two different types of artists. It's either like, Mel and the Marxes, or it's writers and actors and directors and that go into that depth. I'm
the
just
dark
as
side.
much of a, yeah, I idolize De Niro and Pacino as well.
Mhm. Speaking of psychiatrists, you have a very funny portrait of a psychiatrist who is just bored with his suburban, patient who thinks he has problems, and he wants the real stuff. He wants drug addiction. He wants mental illness. And
Yeah, that was
did your
not my,
psychiatrist
that was,
your childhood psychiatrist ever like admit that to you, that, you know what, kid, you don't have problems. I'll show you
no,
real problems.
no. I mean, he did, like, I do remember that a couple times he was like dozing when I was a kid, but he wasn't bored. I think he just probably had too much sugar for
Mhm,
breakfast that morning. He liked sugar a lot,
mhm,
I remember. And so, but no, he never pushed me into talking about serious, like, I could sit there and talk about movies the whole time. It would piss off my mother to no end, because I would be like, spouting all of my OCD madness to her, and just sequestering her in the laundry room, like, Ma, I
mhm,
gotta talk about hell. And am I going? What if we're already here? What if this is hell? How can you prove to me that this isn't hell right now? That
mhm.
this isn't some sort of dream? All of these things. Uh, and she'd be like, "You got it. You're not in hell. This isn't hell. You got to bring this up to Dr. Hirsch." And then I go with him, and I'd be like talking about Who Framed Roger Rabbit or Peter Sellers, or you
Mhm.
know, and uh, and then I get in her car, and she'd be like, "So what'd you talk about?" And I'd tell her, "Oh yeah, we talked about the Pink Panther movies," and she was like, "No, no, 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 no. That's You got to tell him that stuff." So
Mhm.
he was a great psychiatrist in that way, that he knew to follow me and where I was going, and that if it was going to be healing for me to sit there and talk about movies, and that was going to help me get through the day, I guess, or get through the week. That's what he was going to do. He never pushed anything on me. He very much let me lead the conversation, and he never pushed me to believe anything or anything like that.
I want to ask about a few more of the characters in the book, but I want to take a step back and talk about the genesis of the book, which is, were you a note taker and a storyteller your whole life, or at some point did you say, I have a vision here of a book as a whole product, and you either brought it to your agent or an editor? Well, where did the book start, and how much of a writer, in a sense, have you been all along?
I've always been also a writer. I've written projects, some of which, there's some of the I co-wrote a film called Lemon that I
Hmm.
starred in. I co-wrote these specials for Adult Swim that were these like almost one act plays. Uh, and I starred in those as well. I mean, I was always somebody who was like, I'm writing for myself. Um, but I also, yeah, when I was younger though, and I was coming up, I was doing a lot of writing jobs, and also being at the Upright Citizens Brigade. I was writing sketch shows and one man shows, and so I've always written a lot. And even when I was a kid, I'd be writing sketches and things like that. And also, being a comedian, I guess you would call me a stand up in a way. You could also call me a clown in a lot of, because I'm not really like that type of observational comic. I'm more of a clown, I would say, or even a performance artist to some degree. and I was doing a lot of the like alt comedy scene. You know, I
Mhm.
wasn't really hitting the clubs as I would do the Upright Citizens Brigade, which is an improv sketch theater in New York City and also Los Angeles now. And then I'd be doing like other theaters and performing pretty bizarro stuff. And and so yeah, that was all written by me or improvised by me, which is, you know, improvisation is merging the acting and writing brain when you're doing it comedically.
When did you know you had a book?
And yeah, I wrote this short story that I performed live called I Brain, and in the writing of that, I was like, oh wow, I have like prose. I can write prose, but it wasn't a big surprise to me. I think I saw myself as that as well. I just never did it until I wrote this one story, and then that gave me the hunger to write a book of short stories. And I told my reps that I wanted to do that. I didn't have the idea. I just wanted to do that. And then I didn't really, nobody really bit at wanting to do that with me. But then Fleabag second season 2 came out. That was a huge point in my career. You know, Fleabag won pretty much every award. And my performance was iconic. Just kidding. No, but yeah, and an editor, who is my current editor, Stuart Roberts, reached out to me and he said, you know, I think you'd be great at writing a book of short stories.
Mhm.
And he was citing examples that seemed like tonally it would be what I would do, you know. Uh, and yeah, and then and so we basically pitched the book, um, and built the framework. He helped me build the framework for the book, which was these 5 characters,
Right.
which he helped lead me into. Which I don't know what are the intricacies of the ideas were his or mine. It was very much like a very in-depth collaboration.
Mhm.
Um, and so he would throw some things at me, and then I would take the ball and run with that. And we constructed this, and he helped me construct this thing. And so, and then I was basically off to the races with that framework.
Mhm. I
I think it was a good cage for my madness.
mhm.
The 5 characters.
If people haven't seen you in Fleabag, I will say you're not idly boasting when you say your character is iconic. It was a terrific character. You love to hate him, you hated to love him. There was a lot going on with the husband. Um, but it brings
Thank
up
you.
for
Yeah.
me and a terrific role. It brings up to me the whole notion of cringe comedy because I think there's a lot of cringe comedy in your book, and I would define that as kind of you drawing on the discomfort of the audience as well as the behavior of the characters for the comedy. Um,
Yeah.
are you a fan? I'm thinking of Fleabag delves in that, The Office, Curb Your Enthusiasm, some of your other projects. Lemon certainly is a book is a movie of cringe. Do you enjoy it? And tell me why you think it's a story that it's a way to tell a story.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, I wouldn't personally. To me, I don't frame frame it as cringe. It depends what we're talking about. I mean, in terms of like Curb and The Office, I think that's. Uh, I guess that's like very. I mean, those are huge influences on me, especially the British Office.
Mhm.
You know, the Ricky Gervais Office. And then Curb, absolutely. I mean, you know, Larry David is one of my gods. I think that's like again, to me, it's like taking the darker aspects of the human psyche and making it funny, you know, and laughing at it. And so that's what all of those things do to me. It's like, okay, how dark can human beings be, or
Mhm.
how annoying or petty can human beings be? I think like a lot of the time, like Curb and The Office is dealing with pettiness more than anything. It's, you know, and engaging in superficiality and like in complete mundanity. And whereas Fleabag and Lemon is more about a spiral of a human being or human beings, like a downward spiral, or a plateau in a way of a spiral, which is more existentially darker. It's like, to me, that's more like those things are like more living in a nightmare. And I think that that's what I would characterize the grand emotional arc of the book as like this dark spiral that we can laugh at. But there's a lot of, there's pettiness in there too, though. And yeah, I mean, darkness makes us feel uncomfortable. Absolutely. It'd be something would be wrong with us if it didn't. But I hope to, in laughing at it, we're able to take the sting out of it.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of one of your characters, Jackie Cohen. He's kind of your middle-aged character. He's a successful entertainer. A little bit of Jerry Lewis, a little bit of, name your kind of, maybe again, his career might almost be past the point of peak. He can be a cringy character, but in the sense of, you said it's not your most autobiographical character, but it almost seems like a cautionary tale of the kind of entertainer you may not want to become. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. Or a man that I would not want to become. He's I mean, with him, I was striving to, I wanted to sort of delve into that fear of becoming a guy like that, and create a conversation through dramatic representation of somebody like that, who, some of the things he does in the book, especially one thing, that's it. You're demonized, you're gone. There's no conversation had about what has driven some of these toxic males to do what they do. What drives toxic masculinity? What is the genesis of toxic masculinity? There is a starting point there. It's not just like men are born toxic. Things happen, insecurities, a lack of checking yourself, success, the poison of success, and fame and money and all of these things that can make a person become so unable to look at themselves in an honest way that they start to become a monster. And so he's the biggest, he's like the scariest character to me in the book, because
he's a road not taken, or a road that you can take if you're not careful.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that if people don't see that that's, if a man doesn't see that that's somebody that they could become, then they're in denial, they're in denial, I think.
I was put in mind, his character reminded me a little bit of like Billy Crystal's in Mr. Saturday Night.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's also sort of a celebration of that type of guy too, that I love. He's the darker version of, like, as you said, Buddy Young Jr. Or your Jerry Lewis, your Milton Berle, your Don Rickles, your Rodney Dangerfield. These incredible geniuses who, well, not Don. I think Don had a very wholesome, actually. I think he was like, he always seemed to me that he had an angelic personal life and personal disposition, and that he just loved causing trouble as a comedian, which is why I think he got away with it, because people could see his inherent goodness, and the way that Joan got away with it, because people could see. I mean, not that they always got away with it, but they had an inherent decency to them You know, they just liked offensive humor.
Mm-hmm.
And but yeah, you know, you hear stories about Jerry Lewis or Milton Berle.
Mm-hmm.
And then, not that Rodney, I don't think, was a bad guy, but he was a tortured guy, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I mean, these are people that I was channeling through that too, and sort of like bringing out that culture of that type of entertainer and glorifying that at the same time. I mean, that's like a thing of like that. You know, I don't think that you should be able to put your finger on exactly what something is in art. You know, you can't just say like, oh, this is the. If you come at it from a moral perspective and from a perspective that's you know, solidifying it in a box, you know, you box it up in a way that you're, you know, that only your conscious mind can understand, then you're really not doing it. That's not great art, you know.
There's another character, Iris, who's a elderly Jewish widow, lonely, I would say. She has a son who's angry and maybe not the most indulgent of sons, constantly disappointing his mother emotionally anyway. I also, you know, that also felt a bit like a cautionary tale. I think, I don't know if it's, I can't say for sure whether it's a direction you took or did not take as a son, but I certainly felt there was something, a warning there that this is, you know, this is where families can go if they're not careful in how they treat one another.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, you know, there's a lot of there's some of my mother and Iris. I mean, my mother is a much more functioning.
Mm-hmm.
There's no comparison. My mother is a successful, uh, fully functioning human being. But you know, like I was amplifying my neurosis, I took elements of hers and put it into Iris. Iris is also a cautionary tale for me
Mm-hmm.
of being paralyzed by my neurosis when I become older. And then, yeah, Sam, her son. Yeah, I was, you know, definitely I was uh, bringing to an extreme moments where I've been impatient with my mother, you know, and ways in which, and I think it comes out of that fear that, oh, she's what I am, or she's what I could become, and I think that's happening with that character and that, and so to the point where it's, yeah, it's causing him rage, which is not good for either of them, and it's something you're just going to feel bad about later. So it's, you know, it's like, yeah, when I've gotten into fights with my, you know, arguments with my mother,
Mm-hmm.
um, all it really leaves is guilt and the conclusion that, oh wow, I really need to work on my boundaries.
Mm-hmm. I just, at this point, I just want to tell folks on the call, if you have a question for Brett, you can drop it into the chat or the Q&A, whatever's in front of you. We'll take a look, and I'll be happy to ask your questions as we get to them. Speaking of your family, your mom, she's still with us? I hope.
Oh, very much
Oh,
so,
good.
very
Okay.
much so. Yeah, my mother's still an agent for photographers. I mean,
Oh, okay. So did she read? Has she read
yeah,
the book? And what kind of reaction do you get from family members since, you know, either they're portrayed or some version of you is portrayed in some of these stories?
she's reading the book and has been listening to the audiobook. She's a slow reader, and then I think it's also like she hears a lot of the mental illness in the book, and so it's hard for her. She
Mm-hmm.
thinks that she admires what I'm doing, and but she's remembering like her kid suffering and things like that, you know. And so I think as she reads that, it mental illness very much triggers her.
Mm-hmm.
So but so yeah, it's affecting her, which I think ultimately is a good thing.
Mm-hmm. There's a line in the book. Well, I have this I have a little bit of a theory about your not much of a spoiler, but I'll tell folks on the call that at some point you have a character named Z who dies. He ends up in a version of heaven. He ends up in a version of hell. He gets to meet God and he gets to meet Satan.
Yeah.
Um, I somehow read these stories as both God and Satan are versions of the kind of executives you find yourself sitting across from on projects, and you're working through their egos and their charms. And tell me if I'm totally wrong about it, because it's partly
I mean,
theology, but it feels like there's something real there.
I mean, they're like, I don't know about like, you know, in terms of executives, it's you I've I guess maybe executives of the past, like the far
Okay.
past.
I don't want to get you in trouble with
Executives
anybody.
now, I know executives now. You know, I see where they're coming from. I mean, I think a lot of the time, like what I've realized about executives is that they'll give you notes, and it's hard to tell an artist like what exactly they just want it to be better,
Mm-hmm.
and so they're trying to find a way to tell an artist how to make it better, and that's a hard thing to do because you're not in the artist's head. You don't have their perspective. Uh, and so I've gotten to work with really smart executives as of late who I usually agree with, and even if I don't, I see what they're talking about and how that can help me make make the thing better.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you know, I've not been I've been working very much in the cable and independent space. So these are more artistic executives, you
Mm-hmm.
know, who have, and so there's that. I mean, really, like God and Satan is like just aspects of people, of dealing with people. I mean, certainly most of the people that I deal with are in my industry. So it's dealing with different forms of narcissism or aloofness in terms of Satan. And and uh and really me just like I think a lot about like, wow, what happens when we're gone. I wonder about that a lot. And and I just, yeah, it's like, oh my, I thought it would be funny to be like, what if the afterlife is just as big of a pain in the ass, social pain in the ass as life.
Mm-hmm.
You're just like in
And you find yourself
social.
going to auditions, basically.
Exactly. No, totally. I mean, and that's like, that's very much how I see socializing a lot of the time, is that it's all audition. I mean, my current therapist tells me a lot of my makeup is built on high agency. So it's, I do encounter agency. So it's tap dancing to make people like me a lot,
Mm-hmm.
even people I've known for a very long time. Or it's me revolting against them because, well, I did all this tap dancing and you don't like me. You still don't like me,
Right,
well, now I'm going to make you really not like me.
right,
It's
right.
that type of thing that is my lot and my my social struggle all the time. But yeah, that's what that's all about. It's
We're,
like,
we're getting
what if it's all the same?
right, right. We're getting a lot of questions about your influences. You mentioned Mel Brooks. You mentioned the Marx Brothers. Maybe we'll do this as a lightning round. Someone asked, "What's your favorite Jewish film, Jewish show, and Jewish director?" If I can ask you to be so parochial.
Okay. Well, my favorite, I guess, my favorite film is, I guess, my favorite Jewish film, The Producers, the original Producers.
Mel Brooks.
Yeah, Mel Brooks. My favorite Jewish show is uh, is tied for my favorite show with The Sopranos, which is Seinfeld.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and my favorite Jewish director is my favorite director, and that's a tie between two people, and that's Mel Brooks and Woody Allen.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
I feel every time you say the ad, you say Woody Allen, the director, not Woody Allen, the person. Right. I feel
Yes. Yeah. Well, that goes without
we're
saying.
obligated to
Yes.
say
No.
that.
I mean, no. I mean, and it's important to acknowledge that he's done some bad things,
Mm-hmm.
and but that I can't throw away his work.
Right.
in the same way I can't like throw away, you know, Michael Jackson's albums, you
Right.
know,
Right.
or Picasso's paintings or Miles Davis's album. You know, it's there's a lot of artists who in their personal lives have not been great, but I mean his how he's been able to really break down the human condition so many times in such a genius way, and then also a complete comic genius
Mhm.
as well. He's yeah, I mean a gigantic influence on me
Mhm. Someone's wondering about
as an
Jewel.
author. As an author too. I mean this book. If I had to pick one book that was the biggest inspiration for this book, it would be Without Feathers.
Sure, that's his collection of short stories that originally appeared in.
Yeah,
And in some ways, I agree that's some of his funniest work. They are hysterical.
and he also messes with format a lot
Yeah,
in that, you know, and it's very
grit. Right. Right.
it's Russian influenced, it's Kafka influenced, it's you know, and then he's turning that on its head, and so that's what I sought to do with the book as well.
Someone's wondering if you could weigh in on the Jewface debate, which is whether how do you feel about non-Jews playing major Jewish roles and vice versa, I guess, or do you feel there's a certain authenticity that comes from Jewish characters playing Jewish roles, or is acting acting?
I mean I think it's a case by case basis to a certain degree. I mean I think there needs to be I think there's way too much of non-Jews playing Jewish characters who do not understand Jewish culture, who do not value educating themselves about Jewish culture. There's a lack of Jewish representation, I feel, in front of the camera. And so I think that there needs to be a major upswing in Jews playing Jews. However, I've played non-Jewish characters.
Mhm.
So, you know, I don't think I shouldn't be able to do that. So I think it's always like, who is the actor? What, you know, to me, like Helen Mirren playing Golda, she's a she's somebody who very much obviously delved into what that was, you know, in a very serious way. In the same way that Eddie Murphy did in Coming to America. And I'm not joking. I'm I'm
When he
I
played his
love
Jewish
that.
character, right? Right.
Yeah, I love that performance. I think it's incredible. But you
Mhm.
see, like, that there's a celebration and an understanding of Jewishness in the playing of that character.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, there's way too much of it. There needs to be more Jewish characters. There that and we're not just telling, you know, the same two stories, and they need to be played by Jews
Mhm.
more often,
Mhm.
you know. But of course there's exceptions. I don't want to make a total you know, just like hardline rule, basically because I want to play non-Jewish characters too. And I don't want
Totally
people saying
understood.
like, you know, yeah, I mean, you know, I mean, Pacino playing Roy Cohn. That's I don't have a problem with that. You
Right.
know, there's something very Jewish about Pacino to me.
Yeah. No.
So yeah, I think it's a case by case basis.
Mhm. Someone just says as a comment, not a question. I just want to thank Brett for being our brave spokesperson in the face of this horrible wave of anti-Semitism. I love and admire his work and now his soul.
Wow,
That's out
that's
there.
very nice. Thank you so much.
I think people would be upset if I didn't ask you when they can expect the next season of Stranger Things, which I think they take a bit of a long time in between each drop. So what can they look forward to?
I don't know. We're currently shooting, so yeah, I honestly could not tell you. Yeah,
Mhm.
because it's a lengthy production process and it's a lengthy post production process. So you know, we're dealing with two guys who are perfectionists,
The Duffer
thankfully.
Brothers.
Yeah, and so they uh, they are about the quality before they're about any type of deadline.
Mhm. And what other projects from you can we look forward to on as in addition to the book, of course? on screen, on television, stage?
Yeah, I have a movie's coming out called Boy Kills World this month. That is a really really fun action movie that I'm a villain in, and it's directed by a very talented new filmmaker named Moritz Moore. It's produced by the great Sam Raimi and Roy Lee.
Hmm.
So I'm excited for people to see that. I'm going to be in Alma Harrell's limited series Lady in the Lake on Apple, in which I play Natalie Portman's husband.
Hmm.
Um, I think that's going to be a really incredible piece. So I'm very excited about that. Um, a film I'm in called I-35 is coming out, and it's going to be at the Tribeca Film Festival. So hopefully that'll get distribution. And in that, I play the most non-Jewish character probably I've ever played. I play Timothy McVeigh's accomplice in the Oklahoma City bombing, Terry Nichols, who's a white supremacist. So yeah, so
That's I-35. Which film was
yeah,
that?
it's called I-35. Yeah,
Huh, huh.
and so Alfie Allen plays Timothy McVeigh, and Alfie Allen's a brilliant actor, and so yeah, those three things are going to be coming out.
Looking forward. Thanks. And I guess you can also tell us where people can get your book.
Anywhere books are sold.
Okay.
You know, I have the link in my bio on all of my social media, but you know, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all of these all of these places. Wherever you buy your books, there's my book. It's not in the airport yet, though.
Okay, you got to
I'm
work on it.
hoping. Well, we got let's everybody buy a copy so we can start distributing it
Okay. Well, I want
in
to
the
thank.
airport. And I'm going to write I'm gonna. This has made me. I it has made me see that yes, I am an author, and so I'll be writing more books too.
Looking forward to that too. I want to thank the Weasel Tier at 70 Faces Media and Evie at the Jewish Book Council for their help setting up, which to me was a really fun conversation. And I want to thank, of course, Brett Gelman, who's the author of, have it right here, The Terrifying Realm of the Possible, Nearly True Stories. Brett, best of luck. I know you've been through a lot, but thanks for taking the time this afternoon.
Hey, we've all been through a lot, so best of luck to you. It was so great talking to you. This is such a great conversation. Thank you to everyone who's here, who made this happen, who tuned in. I'm so grateful. Thank you.
Okay, be well.
All right, have a great one.